Your grocery bill last month was probably somewhere between $400 and $700. You drove to the store. You bought the tomatoes wrapped in plastic, picked green 1,400 miles away, gassed with ethylene in a warehouse so they'd look red by the time they hit the shelf. $4.99 a pound. They tasted like damp cardboard. You threw 2 of them away at the end of the week. Now picture a piece of ground in your backyard, 10 feet wide, 10 feet long, the size of a bathroom, a large rug, 1 parking space at the grocery store you just left. In that space, Jacob's Farmstead grows and harvests more than $1,200 worth of groceries every single growing season. Not on an acre, not in a greenhouse, a 10 by 10 foot patch of dirt behind a house that looks exactly like yours. And the tomatoes from that patch? They taste the way a tomato is supposed to taste. You already know what I mean. You tasted one once, probably as a child, warm from the vine, and you have never forgotten it. Here is the thing nobody tells you. The reason most backyard gardens produce a fraction of what they could has nothing to do with space. It has everything to do with a system. And I am going to walk you through the whole thing today. Stay with me through part 3 especially, because that is where most intensive gardens quietly die by year 2, and most gardeners never find out why. Who I am and why this number is real. My name is Jacob Mercer. I have been farming a 1/4 acre property on the edge of a Midwest town for 11 years. I did not grow up farming. I grew up in a suburb where my father mowed the lawn every Saturday and grew nothing in it. What changed me was a retired market gardener named Hester, who lived 3 blocks away. She walked through my first garden, looked down at the rows and said, "Jacob, half of what you are growing is walking space." She was right. I measured it when I got home. Everything I show you today comes from 7 years of tracking one specific bed, this 10 by 10, in a composition notebook that sits in my mudroom. I know what it produced in July 4 years ago. I know what failed and why. The $1,200 figure is the middle of a 7-year average, low of $1,100, high of $1,400 depending on the season. This is not a theory. It is a documented number from a real bed. Let me show you how it works. Part 1. Why most backyard gardens fail before the first seed goes in. The average backyard vegetable garden in the United States produces between $150 and $300 worth of food per season, on a plot that is often 400 to 600 square feet. That is less than $1 per square foot. Jacob's Farmstead produces more than $12 per square foot on that same 100 square feet. Here is why the gap exists, and it comes down to 3 mistakes almost every backyard gardener makes. Mistake 1. Farming like a tractor exists. When a commercial farmer plants in rows with 3 feet between them, that makes sense. He needs a machine in those rows. When you plant your backyard tomatoes the same way, you are giving more of your garden to your feet than to your food. You are farming like a machine that does not exist. Mistake 2. Ignoring the air above the bed. Most gardeners think in 2 dimensions. The ground is the only place things grow, but the air above your garden is free. It costs nothing. A garden that uses vertical space has doubled or tripled its growing area without adding a single square foot of ground. Mistake 3. Planting once and leaving the season half empty. Most people plant in May and harvest in July and August. By September, the garden sits spent and bare. That is 3 to 4 months of growing time surrendered for free. Fix those 3 things: dead row space, ignored vertical space, empty late-season ground. And you do not need more land. You need a better system. That system has 4 layers, and part 2 is where it gets specific. Part 2. The 4-layer system. When I designed the 10 by 10, I was not thinking about what to plant. I was thinking about how space works. Every inch of this bed is assigned to one of 4 layers, each doing a different job. Layer 1. The ground layer. The smallest, fastest maturing plants live here. Lettuce, spinach, arugula, radishes, beets, carrots, green onions, herbs. These are also, square foot for square foot, some of the most valuable things you can grow. A head of good butterhead lettuce at the grocery store is $3 to $4. A bunch of arugula is $3. Jacob grows that in 4 square feet in 12 to 16 days and replants the moment it is pulled. The ground layer is never empty. Spring lettuce bolts in July. Heat-tolerant chard goes in the same afternoon. Layer 2, the mid-layer. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, bush beans, kale. The backbone of the harvest. The key here is closed canopy spacing. Every plant is placed so that at full size, the leaves of neighboring plants just barely touch. This does 2 things. It maximizes plant count, and it shades the soil so weeds cannot germinate. A bed planted to closed canopy spacing almost entirely weeds itself. Not because weeds cannot grow, because they cannot get the light they need to start. Layer 3, the vertical layer. This is where Jacob's farmstead separates from almost every backyard garden you have seen. On the north edge of the bed stands a simple trellis. Cedar posts, galvanized wire, 7 feet tall, 10 feet wide. It cost $38 to build 9 years ago. It is still standing. On that trellis grow pole beans, cucumbers, indeterminate tomatoes, winter squash trained up and held in fabric slings. These plants use the air, not the ground. And because the trellis runs along the north edge, the shadow falls away from the garden, not into it. In a good season, the vertical layer adds the equivalent of 40 to 60 square feet of growing space to a bed that is only 100 square feet on the ground. That is the math that makes $1,200 possible. You are not farming 100 square feet, you are farming 160. Layer 4, the edge layer. The perimeter of the bed is the most overlooked real estate in any garden. Low herbs go here, nasturtiums, edible, and they confuse aphids, marigolds which deter nematodes, strawberries which spread along the edge and ask for almost no attention once established. The edge layer costs almost nothing to maintain, but it adds a steady harvest stream that never appears on most people's garden plans. 4 layers, 100 square feet of ground, working in 4 directions at once. But here is the part most people still miss, and it is what turns a good summer harvest into a full season, $1,200 yield. It is the succession calendar, and most gardeners never think about it at all. Part 3. The succession calendar, where the real money hides. A typical backyard tomato goes in around Memorial Day. It produces in July and August. By mid-September, it is spent. The gardener pulls it in October. That bed produced for 10 weeks out of a 24-week growing season. I do not think in plants. I think in weeks. Every plant in my notebook has a number next to it. Weeks from transplant to first harvest, weeks of production, and weeks of follow-on crop needs to finish before frost. I work backward from my first frost date, the way a baker works backward from dinner time. Here is what that looks like across one full season in the 10 by 10. Late March, cold hardy seedlings go out under row cover. Spinach, lettuce, arugula, kale, beets. These harvest through May. Late April, warm season transplants go in. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant take the mid-layer and trellis. Cold season plants are still producing alongside them. Mid-June, spring greens bolt. But 2 weeks earlier, I started heat-tolerant replacements in trays. Swiss chard and Malabar spinach go in the moment the spring greens come out. The ground layer misses 0 weeks. Mid-July, 8 weeks before first frost, fall crops go in. Beets, carrots, and fall spinach seeded direct. Broccoli and kale transplants started indoors in late June. These produce from September through November and, under row cover, into December. Late August, trellis beans and cucumbers slow down and come out. Fall peas go in below the cleared trellis for a September harvest. The result, this bed produces in every month from April through November. 8 months of harvest from a bed most people use for 3. That extended season is worth $300 to $400 of the total $1,200 on its own. It is free money sitting in the calendar that most gardeners walk right past. If you have ever had a garden that just stopped producing after August and you did not know why, Drop that in the comments. I want to know if the empty season problem was the one holding you back. But none of this works without what comes next. And this is where most intensive gardening systems fail quietly, sometimes by year 2, without the gardener ever understanding what went wrong. Part 4. The soil system that holds it all together. When you pack more plants into 100 square feet than a conventional garden puts into 400, those plants pull more from the soil. More nutrients, more microbial activity, more of everything. Most intensive gardens run strong for 1 season, good for 2. By year 3, the yields drop. By year 4, nobody knows why, because the soil looks exactly the same as it always did. What changed is invisible. The microbial life, the bacteria and fungi that convert organic matter into plant-available nutrients, was slowly depleted by heavy production without adequate return. The soil is running on empty. Jacob's Farmstead uses 3 inputs that have kept this bed producing at full capacity for 7 consecutive years. No synthetic fertilizer, no store-bought amendment. Input 1. 3 inches of compost every spring, laid on top, not worked in. The earthworms and rain carry it down. I make mine from kitchen scraps, garden waste, and bedding from 2 rabbit hutches. It costs nothing but time. This is the foundation. Input 2. Chop and drop through the season. Every spent plant that comes out of the bed, pulled tomato vines, bolted lettuce, trimmed leaves not going to the kitchen, gets chopped into small pieces and laid back onto the soil surface. Not into a compost pile, directly back onto the bed. This is the oldest soil feeding technique on Earth. The leaves fall, they break down, the nutrients return. I do not interrupt that cycle, I accelerate it. Chopped material on the surface also holds moisture and suppresses weeds. 1 action, 3 jobs. Input 3. Fermented plant tea, once a month. A handful of comfrey leaves or nettles, soaked in a bucket of water for 2 weeks, strained, diluted 10:1, watered at the base of heavy producers, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash. This delivers soluble nutrients directly to the root zone at the moment the soil is working hardest, and it noticeably improves fruit set and size in the second half of the season. 3 inputs, compost in spring, chop and drop all season, liquid feed monthly. The soil has gotten richer every year for 7 years, not despite heavy production, because of how the production is managed. Part 5. What $1,200 actually looks like, and how I track it. I want to be precise about this number, because the last thing I want is a figure you cannot verify. I do not estimate my harvest, I track it. Every time something comes out of the bed, I record it in the notebook. The date, the vegetable, the weight or count, and the current price at my local grocery store. Not the farmer's market price. The grocery store price, which is lower. I am conservative. Over 7 years, $1,100 to $1,400 per season. Average, $1,200. Here is what that looks like in real food. 50 to 60 pounds of tomatoes, July through September, at $2.50 per pound. That is $125 to $150 in tomatoes alone. 30 to 40 pounds of cucumbers, 15 to 20 pounds of beans, 10 to 12 pounds of peppers. Salad greens continuously from April through November. Then the herbs. This is the number that surprises people every time. A bunch of basil at the grocery store costs $2.50. I have 1 basil plant I harvest from 3 times a week at peak season. I pinch the flower heads to keep it producing. That single plant, tracked honestly, produces the equivalent of 35 to 40 grocery store bunches across its productive life. That is $87 to $100 from 1 plant in 4 square feet. The herbs alone, basil, cilantro, parsley, account for $100 to $150 of the total annual yield. Most gardeners grow 1 pot of basil on the windowsill and think of herbs as an afterthought. In this system, they are one of the highest value crops per square foot in the entire bed. The close. Here is what I want you to take from today. The $1,200 is not the point. The point is that 100 square feet of well-managed ground, with 4 layers, a full season succession calendar, and a soil system that compounds over time, produces more food than most people believe is possible in a space that small. And it does not require a large investment. The trellis cost $38 9 years ago. The tools I use today are the same ones I bought 11 years ago for $75. My annual ongoing costs run $30 to $50, against $1,100 to $1,400 in grocery value. Jacob's Farmstead started with a 2x4 wooden box in a rented apartment, 12 tomatoes. I counted what they were worth. The number was meaningful enough to try something larger. Start with the trellis. Build it this weekend. Plant something that climbs. The moment you start thinking vertically, you stop thinking space is limited, and the whole system opens up in a way that is hard to explain until you are standing in front of it. If you have tried intensive planting in a small space, or if your grandmother had a garden that seemed impossibly productive for its size, leave it in the comments. Those small space tricks that got passed down and then forgotten deserve to be written down before they disappear. And if you want the complete planting calendar, spacing grid, and seed variety list I have used and refined over 7 years, that is at jacobsfarmstead.com. Everything in one place, laid out season by season. Subscribe to Jacob's Farmstead if you want the next video, because next time I am showing you the exact seed-saving process for the 3 highest value crops in this bed, step by step, so you can stop buying seeds by February and start every season with everything you need already in an envelope in your drawer. Until then, look at that patch of ground differently, not as a flat surface, as a system with layers, with seasons, with a memory. The productivity was always there. It just needed the right framework to come through.